Do, 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 do. Welcome to Thursday Morning Conversations. I am Doodle Harris, Associate Pastor of Highland Presbyterian Church. And today, joining me is one of the other pastors at Highland Presbyterian Church. Hi, Megan.
Hi, Doodle.
How are you?
Doing great.
That's awesome. Thanks for joining me for this morning show. We have a lot of ground to cover, so I want to get started. First of all, today at 5 o'clock, happy hour. Megan, what's the topic of happy hour today?
We are going to talk and dream about vacations that we want to take, which might also lead into conversations of really great vacations that we have taken. So we are calling it our bucket list vacation topic. Chat and dream about things that we all want to be doing right now, which is traveling anywhere but here.
I am so tired of my own house and the paint color in my own house. It's so good.
Yeah. I would like to dream about, I don't know, traveling to Ohio. That's how bored I am right now. That Ohio sounds like it could be okay.
Well, okay. This Sunday afternoon, our adult ed series continues at 4 o'clock, but we're going to talk about that a whole lot later. And Sunday, February the 7th at 12:30 p.m. is our annual congregational meeting. This will be a big one. We're electing officers. We're hearing Kent talk about the state of the church. Megan, what do you think is the biggest issue for Highland Pres right now?
I think that last one that you just mentioned, that I think is what is on everyone's mind right now. This transition time. What is the timeline going to look like? How are we going to do this? I think the pandemic has put a kink in a lot of things, but this transition process has really thrown it off because we're having to figure out how to do it virtually, which is not the way we want to do it, but it is the way we're going to have to do it going forward. So I think if anything, to capture your attention and to get you to tune in so we can have a quorum, it would be to hear about what our timeline is, kind of what the idea is going forward for how we're going to get through this transition time and how we're going to hire a new pastor in the middle of a pandemic, and all of those questions that we all have to get some answers.
I think you're exactly right. I think it's a great answer to that question. All right, friends, birthdays from January the 24th to the 30th. We've got a bunch this week. Justin Devon, Cindy Holmes. Did you know Cindy Holmes got her first dose of her COVID vaccine already?
Woo, Cindy!
Cindy, look for your picture in the newsletter. We are putting all pictures of people who send in their photos from getting their COVID vaccine. So looking forward to that. Other birthdays, Gordon Thomas, David Jones, Craig Siegenthaler, Laura Devlin, Bucky Hardy, Nate Jones, Karita Warner. Karita, hope you're still playing tennis. Shirley Wicklander, Boone Adams, Melissa Taylor, Ann Schaefer, Lena Ewing, Eliza Anderson, Betty Smith. Oh, Megan, where would our worship team be without Betty Smith?
Completely lost.
Nancy Owen and Ann Baker, chair of the youth committee. Whoop, whoop. Jeff Barrick and Charlie Adams. Those are some great birthdays. All right, Megan, time for you to be in the spotlight.
Bum, 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 bum.
Megan, how long have you been at Highland and what do you love the most about Highland?
Oh, let's see. This is 2021. So this has just started my 4th year at Highland. It's been 4.
That seems like it's been so much longer.
Yes. The pandemic has a way of doing that.
What's your favorite thing about Highland?
There's a lot of things, and this is the most generic answer I can give possible. But it's the people. I mean, I think the thing that I have realized this year is how I basically can't do my job without the folks at Highland, and how much I miss being able to see people face to face, how much I miss committee meetings because they're really not the same when I'm sitting in my bedroom, and just how much I miss the face-to-face interaction and the seeing people on Sunday mornings and the conversations that happen in the fellowship hall, and all of the different pieces that make us who we are. I love this church, and I love the people that make it up, and it makes my job worthwhile. And so when that's been kind of the biggest challenge, is kind of figuring out how to do this job when we don't get those little moments that we thrive on to be able to do this job. And so I think the deacons are one of the things that is really helping me through this, because they are just coming up with some of the most unique and wonderful ways to serve this church in the midst of the pandemic. And I am just so grateful for their leadership and their work right now, because otherwise there would be so little interaction. It's so challenging.
Yeah, I agree. Deacons, you rock. We're so glad that you're here. Megan, in all of your time at Highland, 4 years now, surely you have gotten a few Highland t-shirts by now.
Indeed.
Do you have a favorite?
I do, and I have it right here with me. So I actually have a twofold answer to this. The first is that I think this is my favorite, the home shirt. I love the design. Shout out to whoever did that.
Isn't that you, Megan?
Me. I think it's fun, but I also really love the actual like t-shirts that we use. Like, they're so soft, and I love it. But for nostalgia's sake, this was the first shirt that I was gifted when I walked into the doors at Highland. So it's an oldie but a goodie. But what is even better about this shirt is that it's not actually mine anymore, because it's an extra large. So now my husband wears it. But it's an extra large because when I came to Highland, I was super pregnant. So I have a bunch of extra large Highland shirts now, because that was all I could fit into. So I like both of them for different reasons.
I think all we can say is you're welcome, Shannon.
Yeah,
You're
that's
welcome.
true.
All right. Well, the real reason we have you on here is to talk about the Adult Ed series, Suffering, Grief, and Hope. Tell us about that series.
Yeah. So a lot of times when the adult ed committee sits down to look at kind of what we would want our next big topic to do, we actually thumb through the Westminster John Knox press catalog to see what they're putting out, what they're publishing, because they often have a good kind of thumb on what's important to the Christian community. And so that's actually how we came across this little book, which is called Beautiful and Terrible Things. It's by Christian Brady, who we'll talk about in just a second. And that kind of sparked within the committee kind of this conversation of recognizing that we are deep in the dead of winter in a year in which there was a pandemic. And it's just been a massive struggle for folks in the mental health world. Folks who are already struggling with depression and compounded by grief and all of those things. I mean, as a community, we are all grieving. Like, you think of all of the things that we have lost this year. It's not just a loss of life, it's a loss of community, it's a loss of events, it's a loss of vacations, it's all of the things that we look forward to and plan for have been taken from us. And so we're all kind of deep in the midst of grief. And so we thought it would be really helpful to be able to just speak that out loud and to say, like, we're all hurting, we're all suffering right now. But there are also things that we can do to kind of provide some of that hope for one another, for ourselves, for all of those kind of ways. And one of the things that we can do is talk about it. And so that's kind of the way that this kind of came about, is kind of, just wanting to put it out there and to say, like, we recognize that this is big.
It is. It is. And I appreciate your work so much. You personally are sort of have a special qualification to help lead this class. Do you want to say more about that?
I would love to. That's why the adult ed committee actually asked me to do it after we started having conversations about it. Is because I have a dual degree. I have a master's degree in marriage and family therapy, as well as the master's of divinity. And I am currently a therapist. I work in a small private practice, very, very part-time, obviously. But that's also, so that's kind of what qualifies for me this to teach this, but it also is what kind of informs everything that I'm doing. The thing that I told the class this last week is that, normally in the mental health world, December and January are really low months. Like you know that a lot of your clients are going to cancel, that a lot of them are going to take a break, and you're not going to have that many clients. But when February hits, usually that's a kind of uptake. So it's like folks are okay, they make it through the holidays, they think like we can do it. And then they get through January and they realize, oh, winter is still here. It's still not sunny outside. It's still gross. And I need that extra help and that extra boost. So usually in a normal year, February would be when we see the uptake. But in my practice and from all the other networks that I'm involved in, this is not unusual. Like across the board in Louisville, our phone has been ringing off the hook the entire year. And we just had to hire 6 new therapists in November and December to kind of help with that load, because we are all just hurting as a community. And that's kind of across the board in the mental health world. And so that's kind of another reason for why we really wanted to offer this to our congregation and to our community, to be able to say like this is real, and we need to name it, and we need to kind of discuss our way through it.
It's telling a truth, and telling our truth is so critical in our faith. And so I love that you're giving that space. Have you learned or explored something in a new way as you've been preparing for the class?
I think I have. So the way I kind of set up the class was that this last week we talked a little bit about the mental health side of things. So we went through, some of our country's history in terms of what are some of the models of grief, what some psychologists and psychiatrists have kind of come up with for when they study grief. And also just kind of naming the fact that we actually don't do it well as a society. Like there are so many other countries and other cultures that can grieve so much better than we do. And so kind of recognizing that, and recognizing that a lot of the stuff that's coming out of the mental health world these days is a kind of a backlash to everything that started in the 70s, which is really when kind of grief work started. So it's a lot of people kind of turning around saying, so this is all of the past ways that we have said that grief works. Like you have the 5 stages of grief, which I think a lot of people kind of know is like a way to get through grief in theory. But what folks are saying now is like, so yeah, that's an okay model. It's okay to like think through that, but actually we need to do this way better, and we need to figure out how to hold space for people who are grieving, and we need to recognize that grief doesn't have a timeline. You can't check off the 5 stages of grief and be like, okay, I'm done with grief. Like it's just difficult to slog through, and we don't give people that space. And so then this week we're actually going to talk about a little bit more getting into Christian Brady's book, because his whole book is about kind of the Christianity and the theology of suffering and grief and hope. He has a really interesting and difficult past in that his son died of a very rare blood disease when he was 8. So his son basically woke up with symptoms that were flu-like, and then, a couple days later ended up in the hospital, and then a couple days later had died. And so he is just horribly uniquely qualified to speak on this, but he's also an Episcopal priest in Lexington, actually, very close by. And so he kind of speaks to the Christian side of suffering and grief, and how we as Christians also don't do this as good. We often offer Bible verses or platitudes to try and boost people up so that they can be happy again, when in reality we need to recognize that, Jesus feared death. And you look at the story of Job and you think through, the suffering that Job went through, and he offers a lot of really, really good points. So we're going to go through kind of the Christian side of things this week. And I think the thing, I guess you actually asked me what I learned. I think the big thing that I've been going through and kind of challenging myself with is trying to find the hope. Because I can talk all day about grief and suffering, clearly. But the hope piece is what's kind of challenging me and trying me in these moments, um, helping me find that as well, because as we look around right now, it's hard to find that. And so that's been something that I've worked really hard on, and tried to prepare for the class to be able to kind of have those conversations and gain knowledge from our congregants.
Thank you. That's a lot. Um, okay, so you now have Highland Pres right now as a captive audience. Is there anything that you would like to tell them I didn't ask you about, whether it's about this adult ed series, which sounds awesome, or anything else?
Well, I should say that Christian is going to come talk to us on the 7th of February. So we'll do one more class with me, and then he'll come. And I think that that's going to be a really, really great addition to the series, a good conversation. And the other thing that I would say is that Adult Ed is, in conjunction with the Race Equity Task Force, is planning some stuff for the end of February and on into March. We're going to read the book White Too Long by Robert Jones, as a congregation, and have some small group offerings that will obviously be digital. But I think that that's going to be really helpful for us as a congregation, as we try to do some of the race equity work and try to tend well to our past as Christians and Presbyterians. And I think that's going to be an interesting series. It's gonna really challenge us in some good positive ways. So I just want to put a little highlight in there. That starts February 28th, at 5 p.m. There will be a panel discussion with Joe Phelps and our own Angie Andriot and Kevin Burns. And then from there, there's some small group offerings.
Thanks. Thanks.
You betcha.
Well, and thank you to Adult Ed for all the good work you're doing right now, and at a time where it's got to be difficult to do good work. So awesome. All right. Well, everybody, next week, our guest will be Dr. John Kim. He's sort of become Highland's go-to expert with questions about COVID-19, the coronavirus, vaccines, gatherings. So if you have specific questions for John, go ahead and leave them in the comments. I'll be sure that he gets asked those questions next week. And I hope to see you again next week, Thursday morning, for a conversation with John. So that's all I've got. All right.
Thanks for having me.
Ha, Megan, you were great. And thanks, everybody. We will see you next week.